This week, we talk about 15 years of democracy, the whole security challenge, and the controversial Akwa Ibom pension law. Our guest is Ferry Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana. We'll get to that interview in a bit, but first, let's do a recap of some of the top stories from the courts. I am Shola Shuyeli.
A federal high court in Abuja last week Monday held that it was unconstitutional for the judiciary to submit its annual budget estimates to the executive for consideration and inclusion in its appropriation bill to the National Assembly for passage as budget. Justice Ahmed Mohammed, in his judgment, held that the practice was not only wrong but offends the principle of separation of power and independence of the judiciary enshrined in the Constitution. The judge held that since the judiciary was not an agency of the executive and the National Assembly is not made to submit its budget estimates to the executive, it was wrong to expect the judiciary to be subjected to executive control in budgeting and finance. The judgment was delivered based on a suit filed by a former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Olisa Agbakoba, SAN, seeking, amongst others, fiscal autonomy for the judiciary. The Attorney General of the Federation, the National Judicial Council, and the National Assembly were the defendants in the suit. The National Industrial Court sitting in Abuja has fixed the 13th of June to decide if it will go ahead to hear the case filed by the suspended governor of the central bank, Malam Sanusi Lamido, challenging his suspension by President Jonathan. The court reached this decision after an oral request by counsel to President Goodluck Jonathan, Mr. Michael Zakome, seeking for a stay of proceeding pending the hearing and determination of its appeal by the appellate court. According to Mr. Ozekome, all the parties in the case had filed an appeal challenging the ruling of Justice Gabriel Kolawole of the Federal High Court, who ordered the transfer of the case from his court to the National Industrial Court. The president of the National Industrial Court, Justice Babatunde Adejumo, has however urged the parties to file an appeal before his court, asking for a stay of proceedings, saying he cannot decline the order of the High Court mandating him to hear the suit in line with Section 47 of the 1999 Constitution. From the National Industrial Court to the Court of Appeal, which last week Wednesday upheld the judgment of a Federal Capital Territory High Court, which sacked Chief Gus Power Ake as the chairman of the People's Democratic Party in Rivers State. The Abuja High Court had returned Felix Obua and Walter Ibibia Okwuene as chairman and secretary of the party in the state. Dissatisfied with this verdict, Chief Ake and another member of the sacked Executive Council had filed the appeal against the decision by the Abuja High Court. A three-man panel of the appellate court, led by Justice Ahmed Yahaya, however, upheld the arguments by those opposed to the appeal and held in the respondent's favor. Three members of the sacked Executive Council, on whose behalf Ake had filed the appeal, had dissociated themselves from the case and sought that it be struck out because their consent was not obtained before the legal action was commenced. The panel, in a unanimous judgment, held that the appellants were wrong to have filed the appeal in representative capacity without the consent of those on whose behalf the appeal was filed. From the appeal court to the Supreme Court, which last week voided the election of Mr. Oker Jev into the National Assembly to represent Buruku Federal Constituency in the House of Representatives. The Apex Court panel, led by Justice Walton Kanu, ordered that a fresh election be held within 90 days to fill the vacant seat. Mr. Jev was elected into the House of Representatives on the platform of the Action Congress of Nigeria, now the All Progressives Congress. The Supreme Court affirmed the judgment of the Court of Appeal in Makurdi, which earlier ruled that Mr. Jev was not the valid candidate of the ACN in the 2011 election. The court therefore ordered that Jeff's name be removed from the ballot papers and be substituted with the name of the valid candidate, Seka Ayotiom, who was the first respondent in the suit.
And now to our interview segment. My guest, Mr. Femi Falana, is very well known for his activism. He was called to the Nigerian bar in 1982 and has practiced law for over 30 years. In 2012, he was conferred with the prestigious rank of Senior Advocate of Nigeria, SAN. In this interview segment, we talk about 15 years of democracy and the whole security challenge. I want us to start with 15 years of democracy. When you look at the direction the country is going, is there anything to cheer about? Can we say that we're finally starting to get things right? Civil rule, not democracy.
No, because if you have liberal democracy in place, the rule of law is key. It's so primary. To the success of liberal democracy. But what we have, or what we've had for 15 years, what has been put in place by the ruling class, is a culture of impunity, which has become the bane of political instability. Even when you talk of corruption, it's a manifestation of impunity, because there is an appropriation act or law. When you divert funds contrary to the provisions of the appropriation law, it is impunity. For the ruling class, for the members of the ruling class, who have been opportune to smile to the banks in the last 15 years, whose conditions have improved, or as the president put it recently, how can we say we are poor if some Nigerians, and I think there are about 125 of them now, are riding private jets? I think those are the people really, the extreme rich people, who can talk of the dividends of civil rule. But for the majority of our people, because our political system, warehouses millions of poverty-stricken people. For them, things are getting tougher. They can no longer afford to maintain their kids in school, having regard to the regime of skyrocketing school fees. Many of their kids who are out of school cannot get a job to keep the family going. I do not know any new expressway constructed by the federal government in the last 15 years. I do not know any new hospital begun and completed in the last 15 years that can really address the crisis in the health sector. Hence,
Some have been begun, but they
no. Hence, public officers have to travel abroad, even for cold, to treat cold or malaria or headache. It is as bad. Of course, we have spent over $20 billion in the last 15 years on the energy sector. But what we have done is to generate darkness. So when you look at the development in the last 15 years, there isn't anything to write home about. But that is not to say that the democratic space has not been expanded. We no longer have obnoxious decrees enacted by a dictator or a coterie of dictators in the name of military dictatorship.
So how do we transit from civil rule to democracy?
We're going to transit with the commitment and the determination of the people to expand the democratic space and challenge the privileges of the rich and the elite so that there can be equality of opportunities before the law. And that is the business of political parties, civil rights movement, the media, and others. The entirety of our struggle for equality before the law, for respect for human rights, and for abolition of discriminatory laws and policies are all about that. Yeah. Are all geared towards leading the society to a stage of popular democracy.
So it's something that the people just have to take by force.
No, I mean, power is never given on a platter of gold. People have to struggle for power. People have to fight for power and win it. For now, the ruling class has hijacked power from the military predators. The people now have a duty to take it from the ruling class and popularize power, democratize power.
Through elections?
Through elections, transparent elections, credible elections, free and free elections, not through ballot stuffing and ballot snatching and killings and violence, as you're having, in the country. I mean, you are going to have an election whereby if the president of a country says, we are going to make this election a do or die affair, or a vice president says, we are going to a war, such statements are impeachable offenses. And until such people are brought to book, you are not going to have genuine democracy in our country. Yeah.